We are going to work together on the writing inequalities core practice sheet, the even numbered problems. So here we go. Notice the instructions. Define a variable with a let statement. That means we're going to pick a variable. I'm typically going to use x, but we've got to make sure we explain what x means so that anybody looking at our work knows what it is we're talking about. We then write an inequality, solve the inequality, and answer in context. Okay, here we go. A taxi charges a flat rate of $1.75 plus an additional 65 cents per mile. So if you just get in the taxi at all, they're charging you that $1.75 to start, and then depending how far you go, there are additional charges. So if Gabby has $10 for the taxi, how far can she travel? Okay, well, the variable that we define needs to be the one that answers the question that is asked. So I'm going to say, let's let our variable, and I'm going to use x, equal the number of miles that Gabby can travel. So x is the thing I don't know. That's the thing I'm trying to find. It's the number of miles. Now, let's think through the information from the problem. So we charge a flat rate of $1.75 plus an additional, so that's an addition, 65 cents per mile. So 1 mile, 65 cents. 2 miles, 65 cents twice. 3 miles, 65 cents 3 times. So if I go x miles, it's that 65 cents x times. Very often, we're going to see a multiplication happening. So this is the per mile cost. So take that per mile cost times the number of miles. Gabby has at most $10. So what makes this the trickiest, right, is figuring out what words mean in terms of the inequality symbols. So at most 10 means 10 is the highest. So 10 or below is okay. So 10 or below, that means equal to 10 is okay, or less than 10 is okay. So when I see at most, that means less than or equal. So that's where that inequality sign is coming from. We have done now the first part, define the variable, write an inequality, now solve the inequality. Okay, so let's solve this like an equation. I want to get this by itself. So subtract the $1.75, subtract the $1.75. Those go to 0. So what I now have is 0.65x, and I didn't leave enough space there. I'll leave a little more space. Move you up just a little, and try that one more time. So 0.65x is less than or equal to, and I'm just going to double check myself on my calculator. So 10 minus 1.75 should be 825, which it is. And then to finish, it's currently 0.65 times the x. To undo a times, we're going to divide by that 0.65. 0.65. So those reduce away. We're left with just the x. Those reduce to a 1. And then over here, 8.25 divided by 0.65. Ooh, it doesn't come out evenly. That's okay. Ooh, there's lots and lots. I'm just going to write all the decimals. All right, so let's now see what we've got. We have defined the variable, written the inequality, solve the inequality. X is less than or equal to 12.69230769. Now we need to do the last part, answer in context. We need to turn this back into words. The question started with words. That means our answer should be in words. I'm going to, I think, type it, try and make it a little neater. So it's about Gabby. And for those $10, she can travel no more than, or at most, or less than or equal to. There's several different ways you can word this. because to say x is less than or equal to this number means x could be no more than that number, but that number is okay. It could be at most this number like we saw earlier. So you do have some choice in words there. And because I'm going to be rounding, I'm going to change and put the word about in there, meaning that I'm estimating a little bit, I'm approximating a little bit. So no more than about 12.7 miles. So here's what you need to make sure you have in your in-context answers. Make sure that you reference the problem. The problem was about how many miles can Gabby go. So refer to Gabby, refer to the number of miles. Put your number in and make sure that you use the appropriate description of the inequality symbol. So at most or no more than about 12.7 miles. Let's go again. If you haven't already given this one a try, I would like you to try it. And then do a quick pause, unpause when you are ready to check things. Let's start at the beginning. So we want to practice the violin for at least 12 hours, 3/4 of an hour each session, practice 3 hours. How many more sessions? This is the question. So we are going to let x equal the number of practice sessions. Let's then see what we have. So we've already practiced for 3 hours. So 3 hours plus another 3/4 of an hour for each practice session. So 3/4 or 3/4 of an hour times the number of sessions, right? Because if it's one session, you did 3/4 of an hour once. 2 sessions, 3/4 of an hour twice, and so on. We want this to be at least 12 hours per week. So here's 12. At least means more is okay. 12 is the least we can go. So this is saying, okay, equal to 12 is okay, but also bigger than 12 is okay. So this ends up being a greater than or equal to, based on that phrase right there. So we have written the inequality. Now let's solve it. Subtract 3. So 3/4 x greater than or equal to 9. When you want to divide by this 3/4 fraction, that's the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. I meant to have that be red. So times 4/3 and times 4/3. So those reduce away to a 1, leaving just the x behind. And then over here, 9 times 4/3. That's like 9/1 times 4/3. That's 36 divided by 3, which is 12. You can also reduce your fraction before you do your multiplying. So I could say, all right, 9 and 3 reduces to 3 and 1. You'd end up with 12/1, which is just 12. Also, use a calculator. No harm in that. And you should end up with that same 12. Okay, so we have solved the inequality. Now the solution in context. The problem is about Angel and the violin. Angel needs to practice. What does x represent? The number of sessions. Now x is greater than or equal to 12. So for greater than or equal to, what can we say? We can say at least, just like the problem did. And I think actually that's what I'm going to do. That's probably the simplest one. Angel needs to practice at least 12 more times this week. More than that is okay. If he practices more than 12 times, his total practice time will be more than 12 hours, but that's okay. We can go over the 12. No problem there. Okay, Angel needs to practice at least 12 more times this week. And then let's move here to the last one. Now, this one, I'm not going to lie, is a little bit tricky. We're going to think this through. So Hiroshi wants to know whether he should become the gym or not. Because if he is a member, it's much cheaper to rent a court for basketball, but there's of course a hefty membership fee. Ooh. So the question is, how often does he need to go in order for it to be cheaper to be a member than it is to be a non-member? So let's see what we want. How many times would Hiroshi need to rent a court for it to be cheaper? All right. So how many times in a year would Hiroshi need to rent a court? That's what we're trying to find. That's what your variable should be. So let X be the number of court rentals that Hiroshi makes in a year. Now, I want to think about this very broadly first. So I'm going to write out here in words. Here's what we're comparing. We're going to compare the member costs to the non-member costs. And here's what we're looking for. I want it to be cheaper. Cheaper meaning less expensive. So that means I want the member cost to be below the non-member cost. So the member cost below that non-member cost. Now let's put in some details. The easier one is the non-member cost, because if you're not a member, then you just pay $11 for every game. So if you're going to rent X times, that number times 11 is your total cost. Now for a member, you have that cost of $2 per rental, but we also have this $135 that you pay no matter what. Okay, now it's getting a little bit interesting. So we've got our inequality written, do some solving. Now when you have x's in two different places, see how we have x's here and here, the very first thing you do is you get those x's together. So I'm going to subtract those two x's to the other side, leaving us with 135 is less than 11 minus 2 is 9 x's. To finish, let's do a division by 9. And 135 divided by 9 is 15. Okay. So 15 is less than x. There's nothing wrong with this. But here's what I'm going to do. We're accustomed to seeing the x on the other side. So I'm going to just switch where the x and the 15 are. But be very careful. I need to make sure that the inequality symbol is pointing at the 15, meaning it's got to change direction. So notice, in this version, pointing at the 15, open to the x. In this version, pointing at the 15, open to the x. It's the same. So if I switch the x and the 15, that inequality direction also needs to change sign with it. So what are we saying? Well, if the number of times you rent the court is more than 15, then it's cheaper if you pay that extra membership fee. So let's now put this answer in context. How many times would Hiroshi need to rent a court for it to be cheaper? Hiroshi would need to rent a court more than, now I'm saying more than, because take a look at the inequality symbol. It's a greater than sign. That means 15 is not enough. It's got to be bigger than 15, more than 15. We need to rent a court more than 15 times for it to be cheaper as a member. So recap, same as before. What you don't know should be your variable. We don't know how many times he needs to rent that court, so we made that our variable. Define that with your let statement. Then, because this one was a little bit more involved, we just thought here in words first, and then turn that into math, turn that into math. Solve the inequality by getting your x's together, and then dividing. We did change the direction because we switched the sides, just because we're used to seeing our x on the left, makes it a little easier to interpret. The x has to be greater than 15, meaning he's got to do that rental more than 15 times for it to be cheaper as a member.